What's up, guys? The Nashville Predators have done the unthinkable and they gave up on their former first round pick in the 2017 draft, Eeli Tolvanen, and he has been claimed by the Seattle Kraken. So, all those bottom feeder teams like Chicago, the Anaheim Ducks, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the San Jose Sharks, and many more have passed up on him. And we're going to be talking about how this is an absolute steal of a pickup for the Seattle Kraken and why other teams may have passed up on Eeli Tolvanen. So, Luca, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts essentially on this addition?
Well, I think I think it's one of those underrated moves by Seattle. I think they've done an excellent job at not only picking up a guy who I think needed a change of scenery, but they've had a really good start to the season. That this is kind of like a low risk, potentially high reward pickup for them. Eli Tolvanen was drafted 30th overall in 2017 by the Nashville Predators, and he was highly regarded as potentially being this guy that was going to come in and be a 30 goal scorer in the NHL and do some really good things at the NHL level. And if you pay attention to Jay Fresh, and I know that we're going to see a little bit on just as fun facts over here for him, but just to kind of talk about Tolvanen a little bit, this is a guy that did really well in the AHL, kind of struggled when he was in the KHL, but there was a lot of promise around him about him potentially being, a superstar in this league and doing some good things. And his first real season in the NHL in 2020, 2021, he had 40 games played, 11 goals, 11 assists, 22 points, and people were like, "Okay, this guy's got something about him." And then last year, he kind of struggled a little bit. 23 points in 75 games, 11 goals again, but one of the biggest things that we have to realize with Eeli Tolvanen is that although he's known for his offensive instincts and for being a really good goal scorer, at the same time, he's also really good defensively. And if you look at his defensive numbers, he's one of the best defensive players in the league. And I think that it's really interesting that if you watch his progression with Nashville, he hasn't necessarily put the puck in the net and become that top six forward that people expect him to be, but he's been really good defensively, but not good enough to be a bottom six forward. So this is where the other conversation comes in of where is Seattle going to play him? Because they bring him in, and I think it's a good depth move for them. They've got some really good guys that are playing well. But out of the 12 forwards they have in this lineup right now, who do you think realistically, Chris, would they move out of the lineup to bring in Tolvanen? Because in my opinion, I don't think you move out Ryan Donato, and I think that if you're going to play Tolvanen and give him a shot, you're going to put him on the third line. But you're not moving Ryan Donato out, and you're also not moving Daniel Sprong out, who's got 15 points in 20 games. So this is a situation now with Seattle where you have to find a place for him that's going to fit, but you can't put him on the fourth line because he's not a fourth line guy, and you also have to put him in the top six, but your top six is already really good. So this is an interesting pickup for Seattle. I think it's an underrated pickup. It's just a matter of how are they going to use him in
See,
your opinion?
and that's the problem, right? It's like, wow, this is an amazing pickup for Seattle. They really bring in a lot of value in terms of what this
Yeah,
player is capable of doing. The thing is, though, is that it's not really a fit if you really
that's
think
it.
about it, because it's like, okay, does that mean make another player expendable in terms of a trade and try to trade maybe, a forward for a defenseman? Maybe that's a possibility. I don't really know, but I mean, you look at all the other teams below Seattle and you would think, "Oh my god, a team like the Ottawa Senators are probably in a need for this type of player, right?" With
Yeah.
Josh Norris being out for the rest of the year, they need a young player who fits, the system, who fits, the mold essentially of the core of what a specific organization is trying to do moving forward. Columbus is another perfect example of that. Chicago is trending in that direction. Even a team like Montreal, I'm surprised didn't make a waiver claim for this player. So those were all better fits. Even the Anaheim Ducks, that would have been a good fit too. So now you're looking at Seattle, and there's a logjam in terms of forwards. Who do you take out of the lineup to place on the main roster, right? So, I mean, if you want to go based off points, Tanev is probably the worst one here. But at the end of the day, you need a guy like Tanev, an energy player, to play fourth line minutes because he is capable of getting, you know, into the rough areas, into the corners and stuff. And you always need a fourth line that's, consistently always providing as much as possible. And we know that Tanev in past seasons with the Pittsburgh Penguins, even his first year with the Seattle Kraken, he provided a lot in terms of his game statistically, but also as a whole, in terms of what he was able to do in terms of using his physicality as an advantage point, right? So, just
To
looking
me,
at this right now, I'm kind of baffled on what to do right now. Like, I
I
don't even know.
I have I have kind of an idea, and I know that we mentioned it, but I have an idea that the reason I'm going to move this guy out is not necessarily because I think he's playing bad, but I think just based on numbers and where you're going to put Tolvin in, I think Ryan Donato becomes expendable. The reason I say that is because he's the guy that has nine. He's got I think 6 points this season, playing on a third line. But not only that, he also makes $1.2 million, and I think with Tolvanen, you're gonna get more out of him. I think offensively than you will out of Donato. I know he's only got 4 points this season, but I think for Tolvanen, it's really a matter of when he does get into the lineup, he's gotta have to make a decision as to what he's gonna have to make Seattle's decision hard in terms of whether or not they're gonna be able to keep him. I think the third line makes a lot of sense. He's going to be playing with two really good
Yeah,
players in
that's a good
Yanni Gordon
option.
Borkstrand. I think that's an offensive line that can really produce for Seattle and really help them and help also Tolvanen's progression because he's getting two really good defensive players that he's good at doing. But not only that, they're really good offensively as well, Yanni Gordon and Oliver
Yeah,
Bjorkstrand, that they can help him score goals and become that. The thing is that Ryan Donato's had a really good defensive season as well. So then it becomes, kind of what you said before with Brandon Tanev, where maybe Tanev becomes moved out of the lineup and they put Donato on the fourth line, maybe move Sprong to the right wing, and then keep Geeky there and have Tanev as your 13th
because
forward.
what I like about Sprong and Tanev is that Sprong with the Washington Capitals at one point was playing in a top six role when
Yeah,
there was injuries, and even when they wanted to shake up the lineup a little bit. Even Tanev, when there was injuries in Pittsburgh at the time, he was able to play a top six role. So those guys you need to have in a lineup because when there's injuries, you need those guys to step up. In terms of Ryan
absolutely.
Donato, I don't really see him being a top six forward if there's any injuries. I think he just stays at a bottom six role. But a guy like Tolvanen, I remember a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken, it was during the bubble, if I'm not mistaken, or whatever. Basically the shortened season. So in 2020, 2021, essentially when Philip Forsberg was out with an injury, he really stepped up as a player. So, and people were like, wow, this is the Tolvanen we've been hoping for. He's doing excellent. He's going to be progressing well for years to come. And what
Yeah.
happened after that? It started dipping in terms of his numbers, and he wasn't becoming that player that we initially hoped that he would become. Right. So I know I did say that Tanev had the least amount of points. He actually has 8. Donato and Geeky have less. But the thing is that with Donato and Geeky, they're able to play the wing and center. You're not going to take out a center, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Geeky, because Tolvanen is a winger, so that's why I
To
was looking
me,
more at Tanev. But I don't know. Like I was saying, I don't feel like we
I
can remove any of these guys at the moment.
I just think like I'll be honest with you, and you said that before. I think it's a good pickup for any team that put the claim in. But like you said before, Seattle just isn't a fit, in my opinion, at least in terms of like need, right? Like they didn't need Eeli Tolvanen. I think Seattle has had a really good season this year, and I've had guys playing up to expectations, maybe even better. That just adding a guy like Tolvanen, it makes sense to some extent, but at the same time, it's like, are you really going to put him in a position to succeed? Because Nashville put him in the top six and he struggled. And the question becomes, are you going to put him in the top six or are you going to make him play third, fourth line minutes? What's Eeli Tolvanen's value in terms of Seattle? How does Seattle view him, right? And then the other question, and the big question is, what happens when Shane Wright comes back from the World Juniors, right? What happens to Eeli Tolvanen at that point? I know people could turn around and say they'll send Shane Wright down, sure, but if Shane Wright plays the way he played after he came back from his conditioning stint and he has a really good World Juniors, I think Seattle may want to use him in a better position. So then Tolvanen becomes, another guy that you have to essentially put back on waivers. So I don't know if this is a long-term solution for Seattle or if it's just a short-term solution while Shane Wright is gone. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on because, in my opinion, I just think that it's something that right now for Shane Wright being out, they replace him with Tolvanen. They're going to see what they get in Tolvanen. But I think once Shane Wright comes back, it's going to be really hard to argue if Tolvanen will be able to stay in the lineup. And if Tolvanen does stay in the lineup, who gets out? Like maybe
I mean, look,
Donato,
they placed
maybe
a
Geeky.
forward, Carson Coleman, on
Yeah,
waivers, so there's one guy that they're trying to get rid of. But in terms of you need to put Tolvanen essentially in a position to succeed. You need to give him third line or top 6 minutes. That's the
yeah,
only way I see him, developing into the player that, he
agreed.
could potentially be, what everyone's hoping for. But at the end of the day, like we were saying, like we are going back and forth right now. This is the first time I think that we've ever been stuck. And we have to choose our words very carefully because we don't want to take out the wrong player essentially and not properly assess that player. And then after putting Tolvanen, but
Well,
then you see that Seattle was lacking in production and Tolvanen's not doing what he's meant to be doing because he's not a perfect fit. But look, in terms of value, steal. In terms of fit, I don't think so.
yeah, it's a weird concept. And the other thing is too, like you look at the top six, okay? Apart from Alex Wenberg, like there's nobody in this top six that I would take out. You're not taking Jaden Schwartz out. You're not taking Burakovsky. You're not taking Eberle. You're not taking Beniers. You're not taking McCann. Wenberg, him and Yanni Gord could swap places. Like it's really not a big deal. And
So then
then
you
not
shift
only
what? You shift the Nato as a center, and then you just bring in Tolvanen. That's a possibility as
you
well.
could, but like the other thing is too, right? Like you look at the top nine from what it says on Daily Faceoff. Like apart from Donato, I don't think you can take anybody off the top nine. And then the other question is Daniel Sprong has had a really good season. Why would you keep him on the fourth line to play Tolvanen, right? Because Sprong has 15 points in 20 games. So it's a question
Which
of,
no one is talking about.
but that's exactly what I'm saying. So you have a guy that you can play on the third line next to Gordon and Bjorkstrand. So for Tolvanen, like the way I look at it is if they take Donato out of the lineup and they move Sprong up, Tolvanen's got fourth line minutes. And then not only that, but even if they leave Tolvanen on the third line, he's not going to get power play time anyways because Sprong's on that line and they already have a really good power play first two units, right? They've got Eberle on the first one with Burakovsky, McCann, and Schwartz. And then the second one, they've got Schultz, Sprong, Bjorkstrand, Beniers. Maybe Wenberg gets out. And they throw in Tolvanen, but like I said, it's such a confusing situation because
It's very tricky.
Tolvanen
You got
comes
to
in.
be careful.
You got to be careful, but also, like I said, and I mentioned it before, Shane Wright's coming back from the World Juniors in about a month, right? What happens then? There becomes a whole other question. So
Look, I
it
think it's
really
gonna
is
be a
weird, in
trade.
my
I
opinion.
think there's gonna be a trade, but we'll see what the comment section says essentially. So,
Yeah.
guys, we'd like to hear your thoughts. What do we do now with essentially Tolvanen coming into the Seattle Kraken lineup? Who comes out? Who needs to be traded? In terms of what trade can we possibly see? Are we gonna see prospects coming in return? Picks? Maybe a defenseman in return? What would you guys like to see in terms of a
Yeah,
trade?
I think they
Who?
should go for a defenseman. I
Yeah,
think if they
who?
do make a trade,
Yeah, that's a possibility. That's what I was thinking essentially, but
yeah.
we'll see about that. And which player would you trade? And how would you value them essentially? But anyways, guys, if you haven't already, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we would like to hear from the Seattle Kraken fan base and anyone who essentially is a fan of Tolvanen and wants to see him succeed. We like to also hear from the Nashville Predator fans. Are you guys sad about this loss? Is this a win that you got rid of his salary? We like to hear your thoughts on that. Guys, we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast.